Hello and welcome to Back of the Net and Beyond, where today I'm going to be speaking to Nick Baxter, who is a former rugby union player who played for Worcester Warriors and represented England in the Commonwealth Games. How you doing, Nick? You okay?
I'm very good, thank you, Danny. Honoured to be invited as a guest. All good. How are you?
Yeah, all good, thanks. Yeah, thanks for coming on. How's life at the moment for you?
Yeah, we're in crazy times at the moment. I think for once, people are actually being really honest. You know, normally you ask someone how they're doing, they go, "Yeah, I'm fine, I'm fine." People are really honest now and a bit more transparent around if they're struggling, they're struggling.
Yeah.
Personally, I feel more connected to my family than I have done because I've got a bit more home time and a bit more downtime. Business-wise, like everyone else, you know, we're just trying to navigate the changing landscape. You know, the uncertainty is probably the biggest issue for most businesses. But all in all, yeah, pretty good, buddy. Not bad at all.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, you touched on it there. It's pretty much the same as myself. As you know, in sport, you're kind of away from home, away from the family for the most part. So this is probably I'm back at work now as of last week because I was furloughed. So, I mean, 8 to 9 weeks off with the family. I've never really experienced that before, even during the off season. So yeah, it was good times. Back to work as normal, if you can call it normal. And then obviously, yeah, just go from there really. But yeah, if you just want to let everyone know what you're doing now in terms of what you're involved in, what you do on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. Happy to do so. So I, about 3.5 years ago, I started my own business. I stumbled into recruitment about 10 years ago and worked for Michael Page Finance as a director of Michael Page, and moved on to an American business about 6 years ago, and then 3.5 years ago started my own business. So Baxter Williams is a recruitment agency. We operate within 3 areas. I look after executive recruitment, principally driven in the city out of London. I've got a property construction house building division that looks after civils construction, mainstream house building, social housing, and then I've got a team that looks after our locality. So I'm based in Worcester and the 3 counties, Hereford, Worcester and Gloucester. We recruit finance, sales, marketing, procurement, operations. So we've grown pretty quickly. We started off in this cellar,
really?
3 years ago, and now we've got 10 people in the business.
That's good. I mean, that's classic kind of, you hear that a lot where someone started off in their bedroom or in their basement or in their friend's house or something in the garage, and then it kind of expanded from there. And it sounds like you're doing a lot of things. You've got like a lot of facets within the company there. And you said you've got, 10 people in the company now? So it seems like it's growing.
It is growing. And you know what, ironically, we run a really, I've been really fortunate to have received some support within Hereford and Worcester business community from the council. We're classed as a high growth business, so we've been able to access some really great grant funding, which has enabled us to reach that trajectory. And I would say, unfortunately, the recent events have meant that it's been hampered. But actually, there's some great opportunities that will come out of the situation. I think we've got a bit of agility. We've got some great people. We're not going to stop growing. Obviously, we've got to wait to find out what the new landscape looks like. But growth is still survival. Obviously, is the first thing we're looking at, Danny. But growth is definitely is on the cards. I was really fortunate. I don't know if you're familiar with the Goldman Sachs High Growth Program, and I applied for that last year, and it was really intensive. It's 20 hours a week, 4 residentials at Oxford University, and we graduated from Oxford in January, and we were with 50 other business owners that made my business look very small, but it was great. And having been on that course, I'm looking forward to it. I've always looked forward to what the future holds, post rugby, but more so now, definitely.
Brilliant, good stuff. And obviously, so you played sport, you played rugby, so you're an athlete, and you played to a high level. How did you find your transition process? Did you plan for the future whilst you were playing, or was it one of those where you retired and thought, okay, well, I've got an idea of what I want to do, but I don't know how to make it come to fruition? Because I know there's many different kind of ways that people go about retiring from sport. And like I said before, there's no right or wrong. But I like to know kind of how people went about it from their perspective and what their kind of ups and downs were and their thought process behind it. So you can just let us know what yours was.
Yeah, definitely. It's a good question. How long have you got? Let's. Where do I start? So, first of all, I was like really fortunate. 'Cause when I was really fortunate because I was the first wave of professional rugby players in 1996. Rugby went professional, and at that time, I just graduated. So there were some mutings within the rugby community and externally that they were thinking of turning the game professional. You know, boot money had been a thing for a number of years, and I think the commerciality, the TV rights, you know, the game had reached a certain level and had got a decent platform to kind of propel itself into the world of professionalism. So in 1996, we all went professional, and luckily I'd had a degree, so I did a degree in business studies and marketing. So I'd always been really interested in business studies, marketing, economics, and so I did that, and then I left there thinking I wanted to be a marketeer, and then obviously the game went professional, and then I played rugby till I was 32, 33. So it was, I didn't really, at that stage, I didn't know I was going to be a professional rugby player, so it's not like I decided I was going to do a degree. So that put me in good stead. Did it really help me? Not really, because my transition was, I'd had an ACL. I don't know if most rugby players most wingers normally have dodgy knees. I had an ACL reconstruction. Yeah, exactly. And then my PCL went, so my knees were kind of getting about 29, 30. My knees were playing it, and my last 2 years of pro rugby, I had to be really conscious of that. But I was still delivering. I was still the top try scorer. I was still playing. And that last year, the coach said to me, you know, what are your plans? I said, well, you know, I've probably got another couple of years in me. I'd like to see my career off with Worcester, and that was the plan. So we decided we were going to do that, and we entered some contract negotiations, and they were a bit protracted, but everything seemed to be fine. And then I remember, I can remember really well actually, Danny. You know what it's like in sport. Yours would have been football, mine rugby. You can remember those poignant moments. And I was on the way back from Salcombe. I got camping with a few mates. Yeah. And I missed a call from our director of rugby. And I thought, I wonder why he's calling me. You know, we're not back in for another 3 or 4 weeks. Pre-season doesn't start for 3 or 4 weeks. I hope he's not telling me I've got to start pre-season a week early and join the fan club. I missed a call, and I remember we were at Exeter Racecourse, and I remember pulling over and taking the phone call. And the phone call, you know, you just take one of those crazy phone calls and everything just becomes a real blur. Yeah. He basically had told me, he said, listen, you know, we'd agreed another couple of years. We've had a review, and we just don't think we're going to be in a position to be able to offer you anything. Wow. And this was like 3 weeks before pre-season, and I turned down a couple of clubs. I thought about, well, you know, am I going to embark in work? And I turned down a couple of job opportunities as well. And I hadn't turned them down. I'd put them on hold. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, my world just kind of fell apart. Everyone had assigned players. You know, clubs had already got their squad and their contingent set up. So that was the start really of a pretty crazy couple of months. I just split with my first wife at the time. Okay. So I'd moved out of my family home. I was in rented accommodation. Yeah. At least I had my rugby. You know, rugby's everything, isn't it? You know, your sports in life. It was my career. It was my life. It was my livelihood. It was my friends. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, that's taken away from me. And then it just I kind of spiraled really. I was sponsored by Mercedes. They found out the club would let me go. They took my car off me. Oh my God. and so you know, every cloud has a silver lining. And what happened is, a good friend of mine who I used to play rugby against, Keith Jervis, a centre from Coventry and Birmingham and Solihull, he was a director of rugby at Cov, and obviously all came out in the press that Worcester had released me. Yeah. And I got a couple of calls from people saying, listen, Nick, I wish I'd known a couple of weeks before. We could have done something. Can we do anything? Can we do something where I can give you a little pay by play? And I was like, well, I haven't got an income. You know, I need a contract. Yeah. So I was really fortunate. Them phone calls in my time as well. It's just, It's horrible, isn't it? Horrible. It's horrible because you feel like you wish you hadn't, or maybe you wish you had taken the opportunity like a couple of weeks ago. And in theory, it's happened to me, like I said, I've never really said, okay, well, no. It's always, oh, well, let's see what happens in a week or two. And then what you think is going to happen doesn't happen. And then before you know it, you're going back to them people and the deal's different. Do you know what I mean? It's a different deal. The shoe's on someone else's foot. Yeah, exactly. So then and I had 2 offers then. So 2 clubs came in. I won't name them, mention the other club. and Keith, I met with Keith Jervis, and it was really bizarre. You know, you get a feel for people and clubs. Birmingham Solihull, we were known as the I ended up joining Birmingham Solihull. We were known as the Ragtag Bees, and Tim Watson, Pertemp's recruitment, sponsored the club, and we were the Pertemp Bees for a couple of years. We had a great run, but they were bottom of the championship. They played against Worcester the last game of the season, and they had to draw or beat us, and we just missed out on promotion to the Premiership that year. Yeah. And they had to beat or draw with us, and they were down by 3 tries at half time. And goodness knows what happened, because we didn't lower our guard. They just came at us, and they had, you know, when you play against teams that are like a injured dog, wounded dog in the corner. And they were like that. Anyway, they came back and they drew with us. They scored a try. Last play of the game, they drew with us. And I remember giving those guys a hug, and I knew a few of the players. And I remember just saying, fair play, because that was their survival. And it was that dogged determination that made me go to the club. But I won't talk about that too much. So I signed for Bees, and I'll finish my story by just saying, so obviously I'd signed for Bees. I'd had a profile at that stage. Obviously, I had a really fortunate career, and I'd achieved some really cool things. Yeah. And so I was the kind of superstar coming and joining the Bees. And it didn't feel like I was at all a superstar joining the Bees, because I didn't have a car. And I remember saying to Keith, I haven't got a car at the moment. He said, well listen, we're sorting some club cars out. It's going to be a couple of weeks. We'll sort you a car out. What can you do? And I said, well, I can't really do anything. I'm on a bike. So I remember this, and this was a poignant moment. 6 weeks before, I was fine, riding high, everything was cool, looking forward to the last couple of years of my career, looking forward to pre-season, meeting the boys, meeting all the new players, seeing what competition was out there for me, and keeping me on my toes. And I cycled to the 3 pairs at Junction 6 at the M5, and I had to lock my bike and walk up the motorway junction to 2 great boys who I knew who had opposite players. It was Paul Knight and Dave Knight, the brothers from Gloucester, great players, scrum half and fullback. And they came in their transit van, and Keith had said, Nick's going to be at the motorway. They opened the back of the transit van. I'm sat in the back of the transit van on the way to my first training session with Bees, and there's bits of kit lying around. I'm sat on a cushion in the van. I'm just thinking, where did it all go wrong? So that essentially, I can laugh about it now. At the time, I'm not sure I was laughing. And I've always tried to see the positive side of life. But sat in the back of this transit, bumbling down the M5 to meet my new teammates was a challenge, bro.
Well, that's like basically because they're the stories that I like, because it shows the other side of football, and it shows how determined you were to obviously sustain a career. But at the same time, people aren't assuming that, or aren't aware of kind of sports people having to go through those things. And like you said, a few weeks before, you had a Mercedes car and everything was okay from that perspective, and you had a deal on the table. Next minute, change the scenario within the club, and all those things are taken away. And then you're in the back of a meat wagon going to your new club. So it's like, So, I mean, to me, that's nothing new. I've heard stories like that before. But for the average layman, people who maybe not privy to sports, athletes and what they go through, it'll be new to them. But that's a funny story. So obviously, you've done that, and then what next?
So then, I was still looking for a job at the time, and I've been applying to jobs. And ironically, now that I'm a recruiter, I've got another business, which is employee engagement and team building business. Yeah. And now, and part of that other business is helping other athletes transition, which we'll talk about later. And it was only it's only now when I look back and I realise how clueless I was. You know, I'd got this degree. Whilst I was at Worcester Rugby Club, we did get free college courses at the Tech. So I did guitar, I did French, I did electrics. I did my because I did a degree in marketing. I did my postgrad diploma in marketing. So I did some art. I'd always used my time really well. I wasn't one of those players that don't get me wrong. I played a lot of Xbox and I played a lot of golf, but I also got quite a creative side. So I read a lot and I learned a lot. So none of this was preparing me for transition, but ironically, a lot of it really did. But I'd always embarked on loads of different things. I always made sure I did loads of extracurricular stuff. And that was off my own back. Not a lot of players did that. And I now work with Worcester and a couple of the players, and they've got a phenomenal education setup. You know, 8 or 9 of those guys in the professional ranks are doing full-time degrees. You know, really? 15 of them are doing degrees. Everyone 95% of the club are in some form of learning, whether it's
Wow.
a plumbing course, electrician's course, whether they're doing the PT course is the one everyone does, but whether you'd rather someone do a PT course than do nothing. So at that time, I'd done loads of things, but I was still applying for jobs. I was going for interviews. When I look back on how I must have come across in an interview, I mean, you've got to remember that I've 10 years since I graduated, 11 years since I graduated. I'd done nothing. I'd not been in an office. I'd not been in a working environment. I hadn't done any interns or any work experience. I hadn't utilised all of the contacts, all the people who were sponsors and who were sponsored the club when I could have got some experience. Because I just didn't think this was going to end yet. I thought I had another couple of years of planning. And so I'd applied for a role with Bournemouth, who's Strongbow, and I got a job as a rep. So I thought, because a lot of people were saying, if you can't get into marketing, you can get into operational marketing, sales. You can work your way up through a business and prove your worth, and you can move into marketing. So I thought, that's what I'll do. And I had no airs or graces, and I was happy to start off. And it was I got a really good, decent contract from Bees. They really looked after me. And I'm indebted to Keith. I actually worked with Keith Jervis again in the last business. So the circle continues. Anyway, I got a role with Bournemouth as a territory manager, which essentially is a brewery rep. So I'd go around all the different pubs and restaurants who were selling Strongbow and all the associated products, cider products. They had some cider brands, they had some spirit brands, and it was really cool. It was a great opportunity. I love people. It's a great opportunity to go out there, speak to. I love people, and I like a beer. So it was a great opportunity for mix of two. Spent a lot of time with licensees and business owners, and it was great. I learned about selling. I learned about interacting. I learned about representing brands. I learned about acting in an ambassadorial role. I learned about influencing. It was really cool. And after that, the sales director moved to Constellation Wines or Constellation Europe. You'd know them as Hardy's Wines. They're the world's largest wine business. And we, two or three of us, went along to that business. And that was totally different. So instead of it being in a more of a pub setting, it was more of a restaurant setting, and it was wine. And so I went through my wine qualifications essentially, and that's when I embarked on my first business. So this is Baxter Williams and Connect is my second and third business. My first business, because obviously I did my wine qualifications down here. No one really knows this unless they were involved in that part of my life for 5 years. I've got an advanced certificate in WSET, Wine Spirit Education Trust. So I am a wine buff, ironically. So one of my good friends in rugby said, listen, I know the landlord of a business. There's an old boy in this business. He's been in the business for a while. He wants to retire. Do you fancy buying a wine business? And I was like, fresh-faced and hungry. I said, yeah, I don't mind that. So I bought a business. It was called the Worcester Wine Company. And I had five brilliant years. I made some really silly mistakes in business, which put me in great stead for the stuff I do now. I had made some really good connections, which I still am involved with. It was a little wine shop with about 900 wines and spirits. It was amazing. It was my real. I love wine. I love people. It was great. It was a great opportunity. We did loads of wine tastings, and then I knocked it through. And without going too much into that bit, I made a little tapas bar. So I got a license there. I got a little tapas bar. I had a deli counter in the front. Could slice Parma ham off the bone. You could get pizza and tapas, and it was awesome. And then the recession came in 2009, and I kind of traded through it for a year, but it became untenable towards the end. Supermarkets were getting incredibly tenacious and cute around their buying of wine and their pricing of wine. And small time wine merchants and boutique operators, there was just no fat in or not enough margin, and so I decided to close that, and that's when I stumbled across recruitment.
Right.
which was a crazy story. I kind of went to Michael Page as a candidate, as a sales candidate, and I said, I want to get back into national accounts. So I've been a national account manager within the wine business, and I thought, I want to get back into national accounts. So I went there, and I was up for a couple of roles, and I was at final stage for one role. And I got a phone call from one of the directors, and he said, listen, I've been hearing a couple of things from a few of my consultants about you. Have you ever thought about a role in recruitment? I said, no, not at all. And it's really weird. Danny, like some people say, oh, you'd be a really good recruiter. Oh, you'd be a really good recruiter. And I'd never really thought about it. So I went and had a meet with the director. There's a great guy called Andrew James. Totally one of the most inspirational leaders I'd ever come across. And and he was a PE teacher, so he's a footballer, PE teacher that stumbled into recruitment. And because he'd come from a similar sporting background, he was a professional footballer, but he played a decent level. And he you know, from being an English, I think he was an English teacher to being a recruiter. And now he's one of the managing directors in that business. So I met with him, and before you know it, I'm a recruiter, and that was the start of my recruitment career.
Ah, geez. I mean, sounds like a lot going on there. And there's a couple of things I want to pick up on. I mean, I know you said about recruitment. There are a lot of sports people who have transferred into recruitment, who I know of anyway. A few people have said to me about kind of similar things like, oh, you've got traits for a recruiter and blah, blah, blah. So it's kind of interesting how sometimes people who you don't know perceive you and see like characteristics that maybe suit to other industries that you may not be aware of. It sounds like, in a nutshell, you've described kind of, you touched on your career and that you were still kind of applying for jobs whilst you were playing and you're studying, and you had kind of fingers in a lot of pies indirectly. So it seems like you were pretty switched on. And again, I always say this, there's different ways that people operate, and you just need to do what's right for you. But in terms of kind of doing more in terms of for athletes, I still feel now to this day that more can be done to help them kind of when it comes to retirement and like maybe funneling them into other industries or whatever it may be. And I can't really see any direct avenues for athletes to make that transition. It's always, okay, well, you either step away from the game and do this course, and then maybe you'll get a job in whatever field you've chosen to do the course in. Sometimes people end up doing courses that aren't even relatable to what they want to do, just because they want to be seen to be doing something, or they just want to keep themselves active from a mental perspective and an academic one as well. Or they just become a coach within that field, so a rugby coach or a football coach, because it's natural to them. But I still think more can be done. And like you said there, so you had kind of qualifications and you ran businesses and you playing at the same time and whatever else, but then you stumbled on something else which is completely different. So, I mean, what's your perspective on organisations, industry leaders doing more in sport, whether it be whilst people are playing or at retirement or a bit of both? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so you're right. Like even though I didn't embark on into any business until I'd finished playing, I think the great thing about rugby, and it's not different to football, it's just that we use it differently. The network is really important in rugby. So before there was the advent of professionalism, in order to get great players to come to your team, what you normally do is sort them out with a job. So and to sort them out with a job, you normally go to a sponsor, or you normally go to someone else involved in the club. So we're really, really well known. You know, they call it the old boys network, not from a sexist perspective, just it emanates from the old public school boy network, which is nonsense. That doesn't exist, and if it does exist, I'm not part of that. But what I am part of is a network of like-minded people, and normally the conduit between each of us, or the link between of us, is rugby or our love for rugby. And that still exists. But to go back to your point around, and that made it a little bit easier. It didn't make it easy, it just made it easier. But to go back to your point around what we can do, it's difficult. I mentioned Worcester, and Worcester's probably no different to any other professional rugby club. The reason why there's more emphasis on what they should be doing now is because the game's only been professional for a few years, since 1996. It's taken a hell of a lot of time for them to understand that when players come out of this, they're in the mire. They've been used to earning some good money. It's not great money. It's like third division football money, but it's still great money. You know, some of these players earn £500,000 a year, £1 million a year. So, but some of them don't. Some of them earn, a tenth of that, and then they finish, and they haven't got any experience in the workplace, so they have to start from scratch. They've got a certain lifestyle they've been used to that they've attained, and then all of a sudden they've got and that will create a whole host of stress. Pressures, and the biggest thing is the mental health issue, which we can talk about a little bit later. And there's a number of initiatives in rugby, lift the weight, that have addressed that. But clubs were guilty, and they still are, and in all sport, of we're assets. We know that. You know, footballers recognise it more. Rugby players are starting to recognise it now in negotiations, and the way they interact with clubs, and the way they recognise their place in the sport. We are assets, and so. As much as I loved the club, and I loved the club I played for over 10 years, I loved them. At that time, I was an asset, and I was an asset that wasn't required. and it was really difficult. I couldn't go back to the club. I played against the club for another 3 years, or 2 years till they got into Premiership. And it was difficult. Every time I went back there, it was really difficult, and I was really angry, and I was really upset. But again, we can talk about that later. But the clubs were really guilty of not looking after us because we were this asset. As soon as we were no longer useful, we were just put on. You were in the transfer market, or you were in the transfer market. You're in the market open for new opportunities. They're getting better, and they're getting better because rugby's become a bit more unionised. We've got the RPA, which is great. They are tasked with making sure that players' well-being, physical, mental, emotional, but also their career is looked after. And as a result, so for example, Lynn Cutting, who's the education manager at Worcester Warriors, she's amazing. She's an ex-principal of Stourbridge College. Her son plays England under 21s and plays in the first team at Worcester. But beyond that, she's got a real passion for looking after the club. She's got a real passion for making sure that these guys are making sure that they plan for the future. Because anything can happen. Retirement isn't just because you're old, like I was, or a bit knackered. You could be, Fatty Loafer, who's recently, just come out of hospital, having been actually ruptured his spine 6 months later. 6 months later, he's walked out of hospital. They said he would walk again, but his career's over now, and he's in his mid-20s. He didn't expect that to happen. There's a whole host of things that can happen to you that mean your career's over. And so you don't just plan in the last 2 years like I'd plan to do. You should be planning all the way through. So to go back to your question, yes, clubs have become better. Could they be better? Yes. What could they do a little bit more? Instead of putting people on these education programs, they could align education programs to some experience. The players have got time in their diary to do half a day a week in an office or half a day a week in a working environment to get a better understanding, which gives them a bit of equity in their CV. But they are on the right track. So what I'm not going to do is I'm not going to dull the great work they're doing, but like everything, we could also always do a little bit more. But a club's job is to make sure that these players perform well for them. So commercially, the clubs exist. Beyond that, there's only so much of a responsibility that the club have for the well-being of the players afterwards. They do have a responsibility, but I think a lot of the onus, Danny's got to come from us, and they've got to come from the players.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's great that you touched on that, because I mentioned this to someone before. Obviously, the clubs have got a business to run. Regardless of whether it's sport or not, it's still a business, and money needs to be made. And you said that players are assets. So they want to obviously give you the best opportunity to perform the best, to obviously make the club or the industry financially viable from their perspective. So there's only so much that they're going to do in terms of kind of academia and things like that to assist you when you've retired, because they're only concerned about when you're playing and when you're playing for them. And again, we'll touch on more of that afterwards, because some people may not be aware of what I'm kind of touching on. So we'll go into that in more detail later on in terms of assets and things like that. But it's one of those things where sometimes players retire, and like myself, I knew mentally that I was going to have to work, because when I got to the age of 24, 25, I could see my career wasn't going to get to the higher echelons of football. I still had an ambition to achieve that, and I touched on it when I was like 18. I had a little taste of it, but there was more to be done in terms of development, and obviously luck and whatever else comes into it. So I think that helped me, and I've said that many times. It's helped me making my transition into another career. But a lot of people, then they haven't got that mindset, and they're stuck in that football bubble and the lifestyle and whatever else, and trying to keep up with the Joneses when financially their income it's not sustainable to do that. Again, you've got friends and people that assume because you're playing professional football in inverted commas, you're on a lot of money, and it's not always the case, as you know anyway. So it's a tough one, and my CV was just sports based. But I had the common sense to know that when I'm applying for a job and I've just finished, it's pointless putting on how many games I've played and who I've played for, because companies aren't interested in that. That can just be a small talking point, brilliant, or conversation starter, great. But they want to know what you can bring to the company, what you can bring to the office. So I had to obviously research the company, obviously research a role, and then include those transferable skills in my CV. And then luckily for me, I got a job on my first application, 2 interviews, and then they offered me a position. So I never felt that rejection. So I was lucky from that perspective, but I don't know how it would have panned out if they rejected me. Then I applied again somewhere else, and then they rejected me. What would my mindset be then? So that's another kind of argument to have, or another avenue to maybe look at, because everyone's experience is going to be different. So it's interesting to hear what you said about kind of assets as well, because the easiest way for me to understand, or how I think players should understand that they're assets, and anyone outside of sport as well, is when a club wants you, they want you. But as soon as they don't want you, you're kind of left to fend for yourself. So in football terms, you can be training with the reserves or the under 18s, or you've got to go and train on your own or come in on Sundays. I had to do it. I had to come in on Sundays with 6 players. The reason they got me in on Sundays because potentially they know that you're going to go out on a Saturday and you can't really come in and train to a decent level on a Sunday. So they're all the indirect things that they're trying to do. I don't know if it's still happening. I'm assuming it is, just because it's just the industry and that's how things happen. So people always assume that players, when a club wants them, it's a case of, right, you should just sign on the dotted line and be happy that they want you. But it's not like that, because as soon as they don't, then you just cut it off. Very rare that a club will look after you, and many times I've heard before where younger players especially, they get released or they've been told that they're going to get released, and then the club will naturally say, well, we'll try and help you out finding another club. It very rarely happens, I'll be honest. They may make 1 or 2 phone calls and that's it, because they haven't got time, they need to move on. So players need to have the nous and the understanding and the gumption to go out and do these things themselves. I used to ring clubs. I'd ring a teammate and say, can I have your gaffer's number or your coach's number? Even though I know my agent's probably going to do the same thing, I'd do it myself. And many times I got moves off the back of that, just because a manager would see that this guy's hungry. He's played for years, he's still hungry. So I'd obviously have that conversation, and sometimes managers would just say, look, I'll call you back in a couple of weeks, it's still early on, we haven't kind of sorted out our recruitment process yet, or I just don't want you because you don't fit into my style of play. But then that didn't deter me, you just move on to the next one. It's just like what I'm doing now when I speak to people and ask them to come on my podcast. Naturally, I know that people, if they don't know me, they'll look at my following on Instagram and think, well, you've only got 100 or so followers, so it can't be that good. Rather than looking at the amount of followers I've got, have a look at a few of my interviews and understand the message that I'm trying to get across. Because there's many people out there on social media who've got a massive following, but they're just doing foolishness. And each to their own, because obviously people use social media to whatever extent they want to. And I'm not knocking anyone, but I can see it happening already. But again, it's not going to stop me from doing what I'm doing. So I just know that that's kind of people's mentality. So yeah, I mean, it's interesting to hear kind of your cycle and what you went through. And mentally, how did that affect you, whether it be negative or positive, like the ups and downs you had through that process?
Yeah, well, I'll talk about that. I'm going to come back to your point first before I talk about how it affected me mentally, and I'm happy to kind of share that with you. The one thing that you mentioned there is the fact that you pick the phone up, and that's proactiveness. And that's so as sports people, sometimes we're a little bit of sheep. You know, sometimes we train, we eat, we do our nutrition, we do our extra training, we do as we're told. We're kind of like recruits are. We're kind of like army recruits. We're kind of sheep, and sometimes we don't get that proactiveness is something that comes from within, and so that's the bit that you need to do. So when you talk about players, you need to recognise where they are. They just need to be more proactive. They need to, and they don't take it personal that the club aren't interested in you when you finish. The only person the club will look after are the superstars that they'll use ambassadors to use for corporate hospitality or to engage with sponsors. And I've been used for that. It's not a problem. If you're more of a high-profile player in your club, then you're probably luckier. But I still got binned when I was surplus to requirements. Ironically, now I run the ambassadorial program at Worcester Warriors. But and when I speak with players, and we use players for that, we say to the players, use this time now. Use this time now while you've got a profile. Use this time now while people know about you. Use this time now while you're on the tip of everyone's tongue, scoring tries, playing, representing your country, playing most of the games for your club. Because when it finishes, your stock reduces incredibly and very quickly. So you still have some stock, but it doesn't carry the weight. So this is a time to be proactive. This is a time to, as you say, pick the phone up to people and say, I don't know what I want to do, or I'm doing a degree in site management. Can I spend a couple of days on site with your business because you're a house builder and you're a sponsor of the club? Can I come in and sit in the office and see if site management's the thing for me, or whether or not I'd be more interested in a technical role? Because no one's going to say no. It's great for them. They can get some PR from it. It's great from a CSR perspective for them. And it works for everyone. So to go back to your point around you picking the phone up, And that piece of proactivity is one of the transferable skills. We've all got it. Even though we act as sheep and we act as army recruits just doing what we do, we've all got that proactiveness. We probably only express it on the park, you know, as opposed to why don't just express it on the paddock, express it on the phone, or express it when you're sat in a hospitality suite speaking to sponsors about the game. You flip the conversation around what they do, flip the conversation around what could you do in their business, or anyone in their network could utilize your skill set. And we'll talk a little bit about the transferable skills. But to go back to your point around, and I wanted to touch upon that because, you know, being that proactive to pick the phone up is awesome. You know, that's just you. No one told you to do that. You've done that because you're a victim of your stimuli, which will be your parents or the way you've been brought up to just go out there and make it happen, because no one's going to make it happen for you. And players need to be really mindful of that statement. Go out and make it happen. No one's going to make it happen for you post-career. Anyway, to go back to the challenges, I've always been a really mindful person. I've always been really positive. All sports people are positive. And one thing that really breaks me around how a lot of coaches and a lot of coaching staff used to say about play, they're a confidence player. Like, it's absolutely not. Every single player is a blooming confidence player.
Exactly.
What kind of nonsense is that? Every single person is a confidence person. Like, you know, we operate at our highest levels of passion and where we've got confidence. Like, you know, and anyone that operates in an environment where they're not confident is confident of them being not confident. So ultimately, I struggled from a mental health perspective. I had bouts of downness. I didn't really go into a really dark spiral, but that point, the darkest period, was a period where I didn't know where my next income was coming from, and I didn't have lots of savings. I was really sensible around a pension, so I put a lot of my earnings into a pension, which I can't access for a while. But I didn't. And I did have a decent lifestyle, but I didn't have a lot of savings. So I knew that I had 6 months to sort something out. And I think I sorted something out in my 6 months. So those 5 months were quite difficult. I've got a really strong family unit. My dad's sensible. My dad's an accountant. And my dad was, when I went to Bees, there was a chance of me going to Italy and there's a chance of me going to France. And my dad was like, no, this is the year to get a job. So we're going to get a job. You've done the rugby thing. This is the time. This is the universe telling you this is the time now to knock her down. You're 32, it's the time to get a job. And it was brilliant, and his advice was amazing. But I still struggled, and I really struggled with the identity thing. And I suspect from an ego perspective, not from an arrogance ego perspective, from an ego perspective about who I was, and what my profile was, and how I thought people had perceived me. You know, I remember going into town that first week, not going in town on a night, going shopping, and loads of people grabbing me and saying, I'm really sorry, Worcester have let you go. I remember by about the 10th person grabbing me on a high street, I was like, literally, I went whacking. I went home and I didn't go out for a while because it was just literally, and this was before crazy social media. I really struggled with that because I hadn't had that transition. And this is where, if you've got a decent idea around transitioning, you've got your headspace around your new identity. And I was still stuck in my old identity. And that old profile, and that really messed me around for a few months. And it was a tough 6 months. I was able to get out of that. My new job was great. I had a new passion and new energy and new focus. My club was amazing. The guys were brilliant, and they were all part-time. They were all boys that could have played for Worcester, but they were all part-time. And you know what it's like in sports. Sometimes you get that break, sometimes you don't. But they were great. They were, you know, we had the biggest cup upset of all time in the history of rugby union. We beat Wasps the year that Wasps won the Heineken Cup, which is the equivalent of the European Cup, Champions League, and they won the Premiership. And we beat them with all their superstars, all their England players. This bunch of, we call them ragtag V's. We went down and beat them at High Wycombe. That's when Wasps were playing at High Wycombe Football Club. We went down and turned them over, and we did it with the team. I was a wine merchant. There was a bouncer. There was a teacher, there was an electrician, there was a doctor, and we were all in the same side. And the great thing about sport and rugby is, regardless of your background, regardless of your job, on the pitch, you're all equal and you all work for each other. People can get seriously hurt in a game of rugby. You put your life on the line for each other. And that bond is amazing. So to go back to it, those bunch of boys kind of got me through that. And I think a few of the guys recognised I'd struggled, and a few of the guys recognised that I've got this perception of who I thought I was and who the world thought I was. And they brought me back down to earth very quickly. And they did it with banter. They did it wrapping an arm around it. They did it over a couple of beers. They did it just and I found this, and I still kept in touch with my old Worcester boys. That was a tough bit. going back and seeing the boys. You know, I had a day when I was repping in Worcester. I'd go back and see the boys. They'd be all playing Xbox or cricket down like after training, and it was really difficult. You know, I was then going back to work, and so it was really difficult. But all of those moments there, they're grounding moments, and all of those moments there are defining moments where you can either get dragged down and get pulled into the mire and the weeds, or you can say, well, you know what? I had a fantastic time representing my country. I was this young lad from a council estate in Birmingham that stumbled across the game at 18 and was able to represent his country. I finished as the highest try scorer of all time in the national leagues. I still am the first player to score 100 league tries, the only player to score 150 league tries, and, you know, and the whole 4 national try scoring records. So it was more about me focusing on that and focusing on, you know what, that was great, but I'm not going to be defined as this rugby player anymore. I'm going to be defined as a businessman. And so all of those transferable skills were just moved, and all that focus and energy was moved into a new vehicle. And so, yes, tough time, but what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And I'm glad I went through that. Like all of the you know, all of the crazy stuff you go through in life, I'm glad that all of the dark stuff, I'm glad I went through it, because that helped define me. And moving through without sounding too airy-fairy, I've been on a mindfulness journey over the last 2 years, and, you know, one thing it makes you recognise, 2 things it makes me recognise is nothing has any meaning in this world unless you give it meaning, because you're in control of everything. Unless you give it, if you don't give it any meaning, it doesn't matter. And actually, you need to understand the gift in everything, good and bad. And I recognise the gift in all of that, like you never know.
Yeah, of course. That's massive. And I love, when I speak to people, obviously people go into different things after they've played sport and whatever, but I love how people can go from sport to then be a businessman or woman, and like maybe they've created their own franchise or company. I love that. I'm not business minded at all, and it's obviously something that I'm looking to obviously maybe push on forward. Obviously we spoke about things before, and we'll obviously link up at some point afterwards anyway. But yeah, I mean, I love stories like that. And you touched on, and a few people I've spoken to, they've touched on the identity thing, which I understand, but I can't relate to, just because I always saw myself as me first, and I used to always try and mingle with my friends outside of football, even to this day. So I haven't really got many football mates, if you can call them, say, football mates who I've played with and stuff like that. That's just me. So when I got a job, actually on the same day I got offered the job, I got offered to go and play for Hereford. And at the time, Hereford were at a decent level. I think it was League 2 maybe. And they were going through a bit of a financially turbulent time. But even so, they were still paying their players and whatever else. And I thought, you know what, I still know that I'm going to have to get a job, even if I do go and continue playing football. So I spoke to the manager at the time, and I gave him the reasons why, and he said, look, you've made a good call, and if I was in your position, I'd do the same. So I still had an opportunity to stay with the game. But when I got offered the job, I got off the phone and I was like, wow, because I felt like I've got a job, and it felt easy to get the job. I'm not saying it's easy, but my process was easy because I applied for it. My CV was just sports-based, and as I mentioned, I had to sell myself through my personality and transferable skills. 2 interviews. I know I was in competition with other people, because they told me, other people that have been in the industry for 10, 15 years. And I know, obviously, they chose me because they could mold me to what they wanted. And I used that in my interview. I said, look, you can get someone who's been in it for 10 years. They're going to come with their own ideas and what else. But you can mold me to whatever you want. And I knew that's what they wanted to hear. And my mindset was, I know that I'm going to have to drop my salary. My salary dropped massively. So it dropped to probably a quarter of what I was used to earning, or maybe a bit more than that. But I was willing to do that to get my foot in the door, knowing that the company I was working for were willing to give me an opportunity to progress. And that's one of the questions I asked. I'm not coming here to stagnate, I'm coming here to progress. And I've progressed within a year, 2 years, a lot faster than what they thought I would. And to be honest, a lot faster than I thought I would, to the point where I was going out and generating business for the company within kind of a year. So that's how fast I progressed, off the back of going in and just dealing with maintenance and inspections and stuff like that. So this is another thing that I'd like to touch on, aside from the identity thing, identity situation and maybe losing yourself a little bit, which I didn't feel. You may have to go in and be aware that, or be willing to maybe drop your salary, because a lot of people in sport, they're used to earning a certain amount, and living a lifestyle and then maybe thinking, well, I need a job that can give me that lifestyle. You may not be able to do that initially. You may have to go in and be understanding that you're going to have to drop your salary and then work your way up to whatever you were earning before or beyond that. And sometimes, again, sports people may not be aware that obviously that's probably a process that they're going to have to follow. And then before you know it, they're turning down job opportunities because the salary is not what they're used to getting. And then those doors are closing and maybe not have an opportunity to open other doors elsewhere. So it's just a message. That's another part of the message that I'm trying to get across as well. Obviously, so we touched on Worcester Warriors and obviously playing at that level. What was it like to play for England for yourself?
Yeah, it was cool. It was amazing, really. You know, like you, we all have our own career highlights. And before I answer that question, and just to add on the point you were saying around the realisation, there's probably 3 or 4 things that people have to realise. They have to realise their careers are going to finish. They have to realise that they're going to have to work afterwards. And they have to realise that when they're going to have to work afterwards, it's not going to be the same money. So you can do one of two. So the transition element is just, it's right in your face. It's not going to go away. And I speak to players, even when I speak to players now, it was the same as when I was playing. You think, it's just not going to end. I don't have to have this conversation now. I'm 22. Why do I have to have the conversation around transition now? Can I have it when I'm 32? And so some of that is around just, I don't want to have most of it's around I don't want to have the conversation, as opposed to genuinely, it's just not on my radar. It's like talking to someone about pensions when they're 17, 18. Why do I need to talk about pensions now? I'm not going to need it. Actually, the sooner you can talk about pensions, the bigger your pension is going to be, the sooner you can retire. And it's the same with the dropping of money. The sooner you can deal with your transition, the less money you're going to have to drop. Because if you do that qualification, if you get that work experience, if you get that experience in a work environment where you've done 1 day a week for 2 years, then you've got experience. You don't need to start from the bottom. But if you don't, you're going to have to start from the bottom. So there's a whole host of realizations that players have to recognise. And I will go on to the question we talked about the England stuff. I work with players now, and we do CV workshops. We get people to write their CVs, and they think, well, how can I do a CV? Haven't got an experience. And that's where the transferable skills come in, and make a note of that. We'll talk about that later. And I do interview workshops with people so they can understand the difference between verbal and non-verbal communication, how you make impact in the right way, you know, how to make eye contact, how to influence, how to active listen. And all of those things need to be recognised, and they need to be. They almost need to come in a starter pack when you sign your first contract. They almost need to go. They almost need to be in a welcome pack when you come out of the academy and you sign your first contract, or you've gone the hard way and you get that first pro contract, to say this is not going to last forever. This isn't going to be this isn't going to be your job forever. You are not a Premiership football player, or you don't play for England. And so they're the only players that don't really have to work afterwards. So yes, so to go back to the England, amazing. I remember getting a phone call from Andy Harriman. Andy Harriman was the England coach, and I thought one of the boys taking a mick because there was some talk around me getting involved. And if I'm honest with you, I didn't really like playing sevens because I'm a bit of a unit. I'm not that quick. I was 200 metres. So I was never the quickest man on the park, but I was quite robust. I had a good handoff, and I did have an eye for scoring tries. Now, sevens, for anyone that's more football focused, sevens is the equivalent of playing 5-a-side football on a full-size football pitch. So you've got half the players playing on the same size pitch, which means you've got a hell of a lot more running to do.
That's it,
you know? And it's horrible. So and so I wasn't unfit. I was always fit. I had a decent engine, but I like to have a bit of a run, have a bit of a break, you know, scope around and go crazy and have a little bit. I don't like this continuous, but sevens was great. And I got Tim Smith, ex-Worcester and Gloucester fullback, great player and a great guy and a real inspiration for me at Worcester. He was a guy that said, listen, I reckon you'd be decent at sevens. And I remember Worcester played at Monmouth Sevens, and we won the Monmouth Sevens. And then we played at the Glenrick Sevens, Henley Sevens. We won the Shield there. And then then he got me invited in a team called the Marauders and the Corsall Marauders, and we used to play around. We play in Amsterdam, Lisbon, and basically in the summertime I'd just go playing sevens. And it was before, just at the advent of professionalism. You know, there'd be someone who'd pay players, pay your travel, they'd pay your expenses, and they'd pay your beer kitty, and you basically just go around the world playing. And I played 6 or 7 tournaments in the off season, and it was good for your fitness, keeps you fit in the off season. It was great.
Yeah.
And there was a chat that Nick, you know, you could be, you got the Commonwealth Games in Kuala Lumpur, 98. We reckon you might be in that side. I was like, nah. And in the end, 3 of the players from Worcester were in that side. The Premiership will hold on to a couple of players. So there were a couple of spots and because I played in the Championship, it was unheard of that Championship players would get the opportunity. And we got the opportunity. Me, Jim Jenner, a good friend, and actually my investor in my current business, and Ben Harvey, all 3 of us from Worcester got selected. And it was just an amazing experience. We went to Kuala Lumpur, which was ludicrously hot and humid. I don't know if you've ever played there in Asia, but literally walk the length of a football pitch or rugby pitch, walk the length, walk back, and anything you're wearing is just wet through, like just to walk there and back. The England hockey team were training they were trying to recreate the humidity, so they trained in a room which had like 30 or 40 industrial tumble dryers on with the doors open to create their humidity.
Yeah.
We went there a week before to acclimatise, and there was a fine if you didn't have a bottle of water within 2 meters of you were fined £100 because and you had to do a urine sample every 3 hours to test how hydrated you were, because it was just so crazy. And all the games were played at 7 at night, but it was amazing. Like, it was the first time that Sevens were at the Commonwealth Games, and one of my mates actually sent me a video of the opening ceremony and walking out in the opening ceremony. And I remember the cameras coming up to me and me going, "Hello, Mum." And then I forgot my mum was actually in the stadium. She wasn't even at home.
Wow.
She was in the stadium. So it was amazing. A couple of points. The whole thing was amazing. Olympic villages or Commonwealth villages are amazing. I remember being in a lift with Shire Hansen and Denise Lewis. Nice. I remember being next to Viv Richards in the food queue. I remember we shared a changing room. There was 4 teams in a change room, and there was us, Malaysia, Tonga, and New Zealand. And I remember sat opposite Christian Cullen and Jonah Lomu, and just thinking,
massive.
How have I managed to infiltrate? You know when you get that imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
How have I? So it was really cool. We did all right. We got beat in the quarterfinals by Australia. But I got to play against my childhood hero, David Campese, and I scored a couple of tries against him, which was great. But it was an amazing experience. And one I'll cherish for a long time down a year, for sure.
And do you miss playing? It's a question I like to ask, because for me, when someone asks, my answer is just a straight no. Because the generic answer is I miss the dressing room banter and the boys and the day-to-day, but I honestly don't. And I don't know whether that's just my personality or the fact that I didn't really see myself in that kind of football bubble. But again, there's no right or wrong answer. So, I mean, do you miss playing?
You know, it's really interesting, and it's really interesting to get some insight into your character, because you talked about being grounded and keeping yourself with your mates, and I did that. But ironically, most of my mates were my rugby mates, so it was. But what you've done really well there is you kept yourself grounded. You didn't get dragged into the trappings of this lifestyle. You always kept yourself that lad from the area you grew up, and you still kept in touch with your mates, and that's really grounding. You know, it's really grounding. You remember the story we heard about Wayne Rooney when he finished his first game for Everton, and after he finished the game, he went and played football with his mates. He was kicking a ball against. He was kicking a ball against the wall with his mates afterwards. You know, and so keeping you grounded is really important. Do I miss the game, bro? I really miss the game. Really? So it's really bizarre. Like, I really miss playing. I still, and like a lot of players, I still dream about playing. I still, and I've got a hospitality suite at Worcester. Okay. My other business has got a networking arm to my business, and we've got Connect. It's called Connect Networking. It's a C-suite network, and guys have got membership, which includes seats at the rugby. So I've got 30 spots at the rugby at my old club, and it's so amazing to be the official recruitment partner of Worcester Warriors and have a box that overlooks the club. And it's so nice when my clients come to the game and they see the club I play for. It really closes a loop lovely. And the owners of the club, Colin and Jason, the MD, Peter Kelly, they're just great people. They own Morecambe Football Club as well. They're great people. They care about the community. They care about the players, but they also care about the past players. So that's how we got involved. That's how they created the Ambassador program. So to go back to it, yes, I miss it incredibly. Do I wish I was still playing? No. So I don't wish I was still playing, because that part of my life is finished. Yeah. And every year I play a homeless. They do the big sleep out. So they do a sleep out at Worcester where they raise money, and everyone sleeps rough to raise money for homeless. And we play against the Worcester homeless team, and they're quite decent. They've got a Worcester homeless team. Don't get me wrong, bro. These guys have got some skills.
Yeah.
And they nearly beat us last year.
Okay.
And it's so good to play with these guys, and then just go. Yeah. Most of the guys aren't homeless anymore. So the guys that play in that homeless team, there's a couple of people that are still, but most of them had been homeless at one time. And it's one of a number of amazing initiatives from Worcester Warriors, from an outreach, from a community perspective. But it's amazing, and we chill, we have a beer afterwards, and we talk about some of their experiences. They've been through some pretty dark experiences.
Yeah.
But to go back to the point, I play once a year on 3G, which is great on the joints in trainers. I play for 10 minutes a half, and I can't walk for 4 weeks afterwards. So there's a part of me that does not want to play, but there's also a part of me that misses it. And you were right. What bit do I miss? Do I miss playing? No. Do I miss the adulation of the supporters and scoring tries? No. Because I've done it. What I do miss is a changing room banter. What I do miss is our away trips. What I do miss are a night out with the guys that you're, the bonding and the camaraderie and the unity is like nothing else. And I miss that. But I still have that. We still have reunions. And as I say, I'm still very close to most of the players I've played with at all my clubs, definitely.
Good stuff. And I always try and get this point across on my interviews that I have, or conversations that I have. The transferable skills that you used from rugby to get to where you are now. What are they? So
transfer, and these are the same for every sport, rugby, football, hockey, netball, athletics, whether it's a team sport or an individual. It helps if it's a team sport, because most of the things we do afterwards in life involve around team. So the big thing is we're team players. The good thing is we know how to, especially if you've been in a captaincy role or a vice captaincy role or an area division of your team that you look after, we're pretty good at motivating, inspiring and leading. But the big things are we're competitive. We don't like to be beaten, and we've got to temper that, particularly because we're quite aggressive in rugby. So you've got to make sure when you take that into the work environment, you modify your behaviour. But we're incredibly competitive. We're incredibly tenacious. Any person that's been injured, any person that's been told by a coach, you're not going to get into my side, any person that's seen someone else nick their spot and you need to take it back, there's a certain level of drive and tenacity that you need, that you take into the work environment. No one else can touch you. We're normally decent communicators. We normally got some banter, and we're normally very good at interacting with people. So we're normally really good around interacting, influencing, and being able to empathise. What else are we good at? I think they pretty much, that you don't need any more than that. That's the core. And all you need is someone with your attitude that goes into a working environment and says, "Listen, mould me." And I was the same when I went into to recruitment. I was like, "Listen, I know about business, I know about economics, I know about how businesses work, but I don't know anything about recruitment. So you just tell me the best way to do it, and allow me to express myself, allow my personality to be expressed in whatever I do." And I suppose that's the greatest thing about sports people. And you speak to MDs, you speak to recruitment line managers, they say, "We want to speak to sports people. We want those people." And initiatives like this and other initiatives, very few out there that harness the transferable skills and are able to promote those and tell people about it. All one organisation needs is one ex-sportsman in the ranks, and you're like, wow, okay. Where do we get the next day from, or where do we get the next Gemma from? Where do we get that next profile? Lots of transferable skills. We just need more vehicles like this, Danny, that let employers know what is out there, untapped resource, which you probably wouldn't look at. And military are probably a little bit ahead of us on that. The number of initiatives where the military, ex-military personnel, and they're exactly the same: driven, tenacious, team workers, good project managers, never say never mentality. They're exactly the same transferable skills as sport.
100%. That's brilliant. And then, so just let us know the companies, the names, where can we find you?
Yeah, so Baxter Williams Recruitment, so baxterwilliams.com. I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on the web, and then Connect. The Connect website is being completed at the moment, and I've got a new exciting PP product that I'm launching through that network at the moment. So watch this space. But yeah, Baxter Williams, you can find me on LinkedIn, you can find me on the web, and if there are any players that would like to have a conversation with me around their CV or around what they'd like to do, and even if they don't know, it doesn't matter if you don't know what you want to do. What you do know is where your passion lies. What you do know, what interests you. What you do know, what doesn't interest you. And if you want to have a conversation about that, then get in touch with yourself, Danny, and feel free to direct them across to me, please, bud.
Brilliant, will do. I'll keep my eye out for you. Obviously, we'll keep in touch along the way anyway. Yeah, I mean, really appreciate you coming on the show today. Really enjoyed speaking to you. And like I said, we'll keep in touch, and good luck with everything going forward.
Yeah, likewise, Danny. Good luck with this initiative. I think it's amazing what you're doing. You're doing it off your own back. Listen, I think there are some amazing legs in this, and hopefully, at some stage you might be able to commercialise it. And I'm happy to kind of keep in contact with you and lend any support I can, bud.
Brilliant, appreciate the help. Good luck. Speak to you soon.
All right, nice one, Danny. Cheers, buddy.
Cheers, mate. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.